Sidebar, I think Mario is maybe the best looking animated film I've ever seen in my life. And I know I worked on it, but I didn't animate it. But my God, it's like they're swinging for the fences.
Anyway, everyone, hello. Welcome to Visionaries. We are back, and we are joined by Ed Skudder, who is the head of story working on the Super Mario Brothers movie. Now, I believe the highest grossing animated film of all time in theaters. I believe that threshold was crossed last week. Ed, is that right? Am I correct?
I think so. I think
well, congratulations. Yeah, it was fantastic. I've seen it twice. I went and saw it with my fiance 2 weekends ago, and then I went and saw it with my 5-year-old nephew the week after during like family movie night, and he walked out of the theater and said that was his favorite movie ever, which I think is everything for a 5-year-old, but I think he really, really did enjoy it. So you guys did a great job. Congratulations on the success.
I'm always happy to hear that. Whenever I have friends and family tell me that the kids liked it, I was like, all right, job well done. We did it. We're out of here.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday about like what makes me really happy is that like, Mario is an IP that I think so many of us have grown up with over time. The fact that it's still resonant to an audience like my nephew who's 5 years old, right, is just like very exciting to me. That it still is stuck.
It's wild. It's like, because I mean, it came out like 40 years ago. We all grew up with it. Like people older than us grew up with it. Now the kids are like just as attached. It's kind of like an amazing thing to watch happen. Like this little plumber just is the most appealing man in the world, I guess.
Yeah, I want to ask a little bit because I haven't seen a lot of reporting on like the genesis of this movie. When did production for this start? How did you get involved, and like what is building the team to work on this look like on the narrative side of things?
Genesis of the movie. Right. Well, it's funny that you asked the question. I have similar questions. I was brought on in August of 2019, but there were versions of the movie before that. I don't know how many. I don't know how long they were working on it. Before that, I joined sort of soon after. The directors joined as well, Horvath and Jelinek. They were over at Warner Brothers, and Horvath, Aaron Horvath, one of the two showrunners on Teen Titans Go. He was actually the executive producer on the Unikitty television show. And you can see one right up there. There she is. Which I was showrunning. So we worked together for like 4 years on that show. And I caught him in the parking lot the day he was leaving Warner Brothers. He's like, hey, by the way, I quit. I was like, what? Where are you going? He said, I'm going to Illumination. I'm going to make Mario. You want to come? I was like, sweet, let's do it. And so I rolled on then, and I've been boarding on the movie ever since. My head of story duties kicked in, I think, early 2020. And there's a few people on the story team already. They've been doing some of the boards. I came on at the beginning. I was just kind of like rank and file, doing some freelance, helping out here and there. When I started doing head of story, we had to flesh the team out a little bit. We were sort of like hitting like the apex of production. So we had to kind of fill out the ranks. And there's a few people I wanted to bring on. There's a few people Illumination had. There's a few people that were already on the movie. So it was kind of like I wish there was like a cool story behind it, but it's very like standard issue animation pipeline of just like, all right, we got some portfolios, we'll send out some feelers, we'll have some interviews, and we got a really, really awesome team. We had a bunch of people kind of come and go throughout, which is kind of kept us on our feet. We had people like dip in. There's this dude, Maxime, who dipped in for like a week at a time and then would pop back out to go do something else, but he was amazing. So he'd be like, all right, Maxime, you have 1 week to do a storyboard, go. And he would always do it. It was amazing. But it was a very fluid production, very fast on its feet. And the team were all champs. They kept up with it the whole way through. I was very impressed with everybody.
How difficult was it to write a movie during COVID?
I don't know about the writing, it's a funny thing being head of story, because I think everyone assumes you're the one writing it, and actually not the case. And our writer was Matt Fogel, who did an incredible job. He's like a super funny guy, super hard worker. So he was in charge of the actual writing of the film. The head of story duties are actually to be in charge of the story department, which is the storyboard department. So our whole team that I was supervising kind of like takes the script page and then translates that into the storyboard, which is sort of like the loose blueprint of like what you actually see on screen. So we're the sort of like the visual translators in a lot of ways. It's funny during COVID to do that. I think a lot of your generic, not generic, your the general pipeline, the generic animation pipeline, I guess, in a big feature studio is that there's quite often like rooms of artists, all kind of like get together as a story team with like directors and producers and head of story and a bunch of story artists, and like a lot of people like talk stuff through, pitch ideas, riff, and kind of like come up with it as like a little, writer's room, like a little story puddle. But Illumination, even before the pandemic, a lot of our artists are all over the world. We have people in
Yeah.
like Europe, we got people all over America, we have people in Canada. So everyone's kind of like remote anyway. I was actually working from home before the pandemic anyhow. So when COVID hit, and everyone started working from home, it wasn't like no one was like missing the story room or missing this like collaborative process that other studios had, because we always just did it without it anyway, and it worked great. So we sort of were already ready to go, which made the transition like not really a transition. We just kind of like kept doing what we'd always been doing. It was great. I love working from home. Also, I live an hour away from the studio, so I'll happily not drive.
I want to ask about Illumination being the right fit for this. Obviously, a lot of people know Illumination for Minions and the Despicable Me movies. They've done other things as well, but they obviously you weren't involved in that process of like negotiating between Nintendo and Universal and like the rights process.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like Illumination's been one of these studios that has really nailed a lot of animated films in the last decade in particular. Why do you think, coming into this with a fresh set of eyes to work specifically on this movie, why did it feel like Illumination to you was the right fit to produce such a big expected, high expectation movie in the Mario movie?
Yeah. No, I think it's funny because I think Illumination, at least within the animation community, can once in a while get a bad rap for just being like minions and dance parties and whatever. I've never shared that opinion because I remember watching the Minions for the first time and thinking, my God, this is like the funniest movie I've seen in my entire life. I'm losing my mind. It's so good. And the talent behind all their projects is like incredible. I think, and like, sidebar, I think Mario is maybe the best looking animated film I've ever seen in my life. And I know I worked on it, but I didn't animate it. But my God, it's like they're swinging for the fences. So when I found out that they were doing Mario, I was really stoked. I think because Illumination's philosophy, a lot of this comes from Chris Meledandri himself. He's sort of like I guess he's like the whole captain of this ship. He's like the visionary behind the whole place. But his style of creating entertainment and the studio's style of kind of following that vision that he kind of puts forward is entertainment forwards. We're trying to make sure people go to the theater and have the best time of their life. We want the movies to be full of energy and like a very joyful experience. Like joy is very much at the forefront of how we make movies and why we make movies at that studio. And I think just philosophically, I think that really lines up with the vibe of Mario. Like Mario's such a happy, joyful, kind of playful property. I think for a lot of that reason, that's why it's so popular too. It's this kind of evergreen, just really fun world to be in. And I think Illumination's natural sense for fun and play and like spectacle without too much bogging it down, if that makes any sense. Like I think that is exactly what Mario is in the game world. Illumination's making that same thing in the movie world. That's like a match made in heaven from where I'm sitting. And also Nintendo's got Nintendo World over at Illumination, so business wise it's a very savvy choice.
Yeah. It's I really do want to go to Mario World and see kind of the whole thing.
It's cool.
In terms of the standard set in animation in the past couple of years, I remember how kind of monumental Into the Spider-Verse was as a film. And every time I have watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I find something new that's like hidden there in its animation style and in the way that it's drawn. It really unique film. And I think it really did set a bar for animated movies after it for what those should be and what those can be. One of my like favorite factoids for that movie is that the frames per second change as the movie goes. So it's like very slow, very like comic book type feel at the very beginning, and then as Miles becomes more of Spider-Man, becomes more comfortable with himself, the confidence or changes with the pace, right? So like it lines up. I want to ask, as someone who's been in this industry a long time and have worked on a bunch of different animated projects, how do you think that changed the expectation for animated film and television, and how do you think it influenced both yourself and others working on this project?
Yeah, that's a amazing film. I've seen it too many times. I think it's like, at least within the animation industry, it's like it's a freaking gold standard of films and the bar to hit. Right? They changed everything. It's funny when I watched that film. The first thought I had was like, how the hell did they get away with this? Because it's such a crazy departure from everything that came before it. For decades of animation standards to be just thrown out the window by something like that. So kudos to the directors and Chris and Phil for being so stubborn and just pushing it through. I know it wasn't easy either. I think the head of layout from Sony, his name's James Williams. He came over to Illumination. He's the head of layout on Mario. So he was telling me some of the war stories from like making that film and how they're like inventing the process and all this proprietary technology to like make it work and get it done. But I think in a lot of ways it came at the right time. I think it was just what the industry needed to kind of like shake off some of the dust and kind of give it a little like slap in the face of cold water and say, all right, enough with the same old, same old. We can do anything we want. It's kind of the same thing that everything everywhere all at once did for live action. It's just kind of like,
Yeah.
it breaks a bunch of rules. It says you don't have to do anything anyway. And no one says you can do whatever the hell you want. So I think in that sense, it was a really good like kind of refresh for the industry. And then even as like so from my point of view, like where I'm sitting storyboard wise, right? Like my whole job is focused on the storyboarding of these things. Like how do you translate a story visually and make it the most clear, exciting, and impactful thing possible? Spider-Verse was like jaw dropping. You know, they also had so much more to play with than maybe your average movie does. They can like split the screen. They've got comic book panels. There's like you put text on screen. It's freaking wild. It's very exciting. We obviously didn't do any of that stuff on Mario. It's not the right vibe. But I will say, I think Spider-Verse sits among a little pantheon of movies in my brain that it packs such a punch visually, and it's just such a spectacle to watch that I'm like, all right, Mario, for example, and any project I'm going to work on ever since seeing Spider-Verse, I'm like, we got to beat it. We got to beat Spider-Verse. Like, whether we do or not, I want to at least try. That was the whole goal going into it. I wanted to beat everything.
Well, I would challenge that you didn't do creative things that were unique to animation. Actually, certainly you're not doing the comic book like page flipping and text. You know, emotions on screen, the pow, like all, you know, everything else. But you did do side scrolling, like in the sort of the nod to the games, right? Like, I loved it. The two times it happens, I was like, oh, like the first time I'm like pointing at the screen, I was like, oh my god, you did like the side scrolling platformer, right? Which is a callback to the actual Mario games. You know, Mario's going up to see Princess Peach, and at one point in all of the tubing, it shifts that point of view, and it is, yeah. And I was like, oh my god, that is so cool. I'm so glad you guys brought that to life. So I would challenge you. You did do something that was out of character for animated film.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. I'm glad you pointed that out too. I was actually the one who storyboarded both of those scenes, the Brooklyn one and the Mushroom Kingdom one as well. Both were a huge pain in the ass, but both were working. I'm glad they turned out so well. The Brooklyn one was funny too, because I remember going on Google and like downloading a picture of level 1-1 from Mario and like dumping it into my software that I use. And it's so long, right? Like the level's huge. I was like, okay, well, we're not going to do the entire level. But keen-eyed fans will probably notice that like the first couple bricks and like platforms and jumps and stuff, it lines up pixel perfect to the actual level itself. There's little like yellow boxes and stuff, and then the ending obviously has like a flagpole and a castle burger, which we were trying to like, you know, not so subtly sneak all this stuff into the real world of Brooklyn. But I think it's funny because those two sections, and even you bringing up the fact that we are playing with the medium to create these like video game moments without feeling like a video game moment too much. Like it's a nod, but like my parents, for example, who never played Mario, will be like, "Oh, that's cool. It's like Sideways," but they won't like get it.
Yeah.
Which is fine because I think it's the movie struck a balance of sort of this middle ground between Like if you're a fan, you're gonna love it. If you're not a fan, it's still a fun time. But I think because Mario has such a storied history of like all these like cool things that we're so used to and so like enamored by throughout the decades of these games, there's so much opportunity to incorporate that stuff into the storytelling. Like side scrolling, we have a lot of like kind of like long one takes where it kind of feels like you're playing the game. Rainbow Road, for example, like the camera's like on the track with the cars. So we're trying our best to kind of like put these like gaming experiences on screen in like kind of an organic way while also letting the audience know that we know.
Right. It did what Arcane and The Last of Us in particular in the past couple of years have done so well, which is like if you're a League of Legends fan or you're a Last of Us, Last of Us PlayStation fan, it like in your you're the person that's played video games for 20 plus years of their life. You point at the screen and you're like, oh my God, like that's what that was, right? Like it's again, you're like letting people like me know, like, hey, we're in on this. But like again, it's not, it doesn't require you to have any knowledge coming up into this. Like you can watch the Mario movie and be completely fine without having never played a Mario game ever, right? Like you get it. And I think like that's the best video game adaptation truly is when it's like a wink and a nod to the audience. Same with comic books or any other sort of like more niche genre entertainment that is now becoming, being translated into film and television. It's that little nod. And on that note too, and I wish she was here, but she's asleep because she's based in Italy. But Cecilia from our team is like the queen of talking about soundtracks. She absolutely loves it. And we have talked about the soundtrack of this film many different times. And I think you guys did that a lot with the soundtrack of this movie as well. Like, you go down into the pipes of Brooklyn or the plumbing system of Brooklyn and you hear the underworld music. And I'm just like, aha, like, there you go. There it is again, right? I know that's not your department, but can you talk a little bit about like the use of music and the way that it kind of helped tell this story?
Yeah. No, the soundtrack's incredible. I actually hadn't heard the whole thing until it was on Spotify after the fact. Before the premiere, I think I'd seen the film at maybe like 85, maybe 90% completion, but the music for the most part had not been in it. I'd seen like a couple of bits of score. The rest was all temp. So when I finally saw the movie in the theater, I was like, holy shit, there's so many references. There's so much score. Brian Tyler did an amazing job. It was incredible to hear how much stuff that dude could pack into a soundtrack and like make it work. I think the one that always stands out to me is the Mushroom Kingdom City one where Mario's going up following Toad, and it's like the entire medley of every Mario song you've ever heard in your life. Somehow it's all like one song together. I don't know how the hell he did it, but I was very impressed. But no, the music I think was always we were always intending on using Mario music, but not even from the first game. We wanted to make sure there was music from like all the games, everything throughout the whole span of it. Because obviously, my generation, for example, like we grew up on like SNES and like the old school ones. But there's, like you said, there's like 5-year-olds who love this stuff. They probably grew up on like the Switch and the Wii, and like there's so many amazing games that have been put out through the decades that have just incredible soundtracks of their own. So it was kind of like a embarrassment of riches of options. We had too much we wanted to put into it, and I know the directors were very, very cognizant the whole way through of making sure we were referencing the whole spread of Mario, both musically, visually, like character wise. Like people will notice like there's like the bats in the Luigi section. They're like from Mario Odyssey. So it's like there's like little treasures from all the different treasure chests from all the entire span of Mario. But I'm glad the soundtrack didn't disappoint, because I don't know. Sometimes you get so attached to like the temp soundtracks when you've like heard these things for like 3 years, and then you hear the final soundtrack, like, oh man, I like the temp one better. False, not the case in Mario. The Mario soundtrack's amazing.
Well, I have to ask, now that it's sitting on Billboard Top 100, obviously one of the songs, the original songs for this was Peaches, the Jack Black Ballad to Peach, Princess Peach. Not only, I'm sure you had to work on the storyboard of kind of that entire thing, which is like very different from the rest of the movie in the way that it's visually presented. What was it like to work as a team putting together that song, which is now, so iconic?
Yeah, this feels like one of those things where in the movie making process it maybe doesn't register. I think I'd always liked the song when I heard it. The song also wasn't in there the whole time. It kind of finds its way into the film the same way any like piece of narrative structure finds its way in, just kind of like haphazardly, and it happens organically as we review things and change stuff and blah blah blah. I actually didn't storyboard the one that's like the iconic one, with the peach holograms all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
That was another one of our very talented storyboard artists put that together. I remember cracking up when I saw the storyboard too, and I was like, "This is gonna be good." Because I'd heard the song, I saw the boards. I was like, "This is gonna be freaking awesome." But it's funny. I thought it was gonna be great. I didn't know it was gonna be like what 83 in the Billboard Top 100. Also, I was like, "This is insane. People love this freaking song." I heard kids like singing it outside the theater after I watched it like the second time. It is popping off. It's blowing up. But I can see why. It's a perfect song. It's fantastic. And Jack Black is like a freaking different species. He's a god.
Carried the movie, truly.
Oh,
I mean, the movie was very good, but I think like Jack Black, hats off. Hope he gets like award noms for that, because like, yeah, truly, like such a well-rounded performance. Be it the actual voice acting and the character presentation, the music, which I mean that is Jack Black, right? It's Tenacious D and everything else he's done in his entire career. Like that's what he's best at. Is like Swiss Army knife can do everything. So
I'm glad they actually like found a space for him, like use that extra talent in the film, because it does bring a lot like extra level to Bowser beyond just being like a cool villain. Now he's a cool singing villain as well, a chart topping villain.
you mentioned that you all were pulling, like the score department and the music folks were pulling from all the various different Mario games. And again, we mentioned like at the beginning of this how many titles there are. It's such a content rich IP
Oh yeah,
over decades and decades and decades, and so many different consoles and iterations. The story itself, the narrative is somewhat similar to Super Mario Odyssey. It definitely has some overlaps to the royal wedding and the whole thing. It deviates in certain points, right? Obviously the entire Donkey Kong recruitment thing is not a part of that. From an animation storyboarding perspective, the art perspective, how did you select what you were taking from the video games themselves, and especially the past 3 generations of the games, the Wii U, and the Switch, which started making Mario 3D, and now you are much more closer to film and television and traditional animation.
yeah. No, it was definitely a weird challenge because there is so much stuff to pull from. And it was a little bit of everyone. I think the entire department, story wise, everyone had suggestions. Everyone like knew Mario and had grown up with it as well. But it wasn't even just the storyboard department too. It was like um, it would come from the writing. The directors had like a ton of ideas. Our producers had a ton of ideas. Even like down to the art department, the animation team. Like every single person who like touched the film like loved Mario, which because I guess it's been around for like 40 years, so everyone's kind of like grown up with it as well. But it's kind of an amazing thing to watch happen, where like just like every single part of the pipeline would add like a little treasure and Easter egg to a scene, or like have a really good idea. So it was cool to watch it kind of organically take shape, because it's storyboards in the process, at least they're like pretty early on in the pipeline. So a lot of the stuff I would watch kind of like evolve as it went to layout and animation and lighting and the compositing and the sound effects and the music. So they would like add a little something every single time. But I think it was a really good testament to how much like love and passion for the property was like poured into into the movie by the studio. Everyone freaking loved the thing, and so many favorite things of their own that they wanted to put in there, and we did. It's chock full of it. There's stuff I'm still finding. Like I'll watch it again and be like, oh my god, there's that little thing. Oh shit, I didn't even see that before.
What were your biggest inspirations personally, or starting early in that process and trying to find inspiration, whether that be the Mario games themselves, other films and IPs? Like, what were you drawing from?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on like '90s like blockbuster action movies. Like I loved like Independence Day or like The Fifth Element or Twister, right? Like these kind of like big popcorn action films. So I found myself coming back to those a lot. Whenever I get stuck, I'll just go watch my favorite films again and like remember why I like cinema so much. But I grew up on all that stuff, and Spielberg was kind of like the backbone of my like cinematic language when I was kind of like finding my own cinematic voice in my work. So that's why there's so many like long takes and kind of like little Spielbergian filmmaking tricks kind of scattered throughout this whole thing. Because I think just that language is sort of how I learned how movies are made and like kind of how blockbusters like formed in my brain at the bottom level. So I think when it came time to make a blockbuster, it was like Spielberg time. It's Independence Day time. You know, Bowser's got this big ass ship rolling over the kingdom. Very Independence Day. There's like
Yep.
all the car chases are like very reminiscent of all, you know, every like Star Wars freaking was it Empire Strikes Back, all those little like land speeders zipping around. There's a very like storied kinetic history of like amazing visual things that I grew up with. I think all of it kind of just like poured onto the screen when it came time to like make these sequences. I think I was remembering all these things that inspired me as a kid, and then I was like, all right, I want to make sure that when we're making this movie, we're making something cool enough that it inspires the kids watching this one, so that when they're up my age, they'll go and make something even better.
Yeah, I think it did, and I think it will stand the test of time too. Like I think you can watch this movie in a decade, 2 decades, and it will hold its weight in a really positive way. So, yeah, again, congratulations on its success. So, Ed, I want to ask about kind of what you think the broader impact of this movie and its success, like we were talking about, will have on video game adaptations, because we have seen over the past like 5 months a really significant increase in like pilot orders and everything else around video game adaptations. We've seen with The Last of Us being as successful as it was, with this, and with, like I mentioned, Arcane at the end of 2021. And I think all three, in their own very unique way, said, okay, well, you can take video game IP and blow it up to be there for bigger, for people who've never touched it, right? For one of the people that went with us to see this movie with my 5-year-old nephew was my 76-year-old father-in-law, and he liked it too. And he's never played a Mario game. Like, he's just not a gamer, right? Like, it's just not a part of his exposure, and he enjoyed it. So, what do you think with these successes? How do you think people should think about translating video game IP to the big screen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's a funny thing to watch the success of these last couple of things, because it's almost like if you make a good thing, people will watch it. What a crazy idea! But I think it's easy to get lost in the lore of a video game, or like tangled up in the weird mechanics that sometimes don't translate to a film. But The Last of Us, Arcane, Mario, like these things are successful because I think they have like at the core of them really relatable characters. Like it's which is the whole reason we watch anything, right? That's the whole point of this, is to kind of like put ourselves out of our lives for a second into someone else's shoes and watch a spectacle unfold. And you come back to yourself when the credits roll and go home and you've had a new experience. It's great. So I think the fact that these things are doing so well, I hope is a blueprint for future adaptations of these things, where people can take the weirdest idea possible. Mario's objectively a pretty weird idea, and
Hmm.
slap some good characters and an exciting story and produce a thing with a certain amount of technical prowess. And if you do that right, and it's obviously incredibly hard to do, but if you can do that right, I think you could start to see a lot more successful video game adaptations of things that some stuff that deserves to have a second shot at it. I remember like watching the old Doom movie back in the day. It deserves another chance. It got screwed. Um, you know, so I don't know. I hope there's a lot more of these films that get greenlit. I hope there's a lot more of them that are successful. It's been exciting to watch Mario, just destroy the box office. I mean, for two reasons. I mean, one is just like I'm just so glad audiences are going to theaters and enjoying it as a family and like actually going to fill these seats. That's awesome. That's huge. It proves that cinema's not dead. It's far from it. You just need to make a good movie. But I do think it's also going to be, Hollywood wise, you're probably going to get a huge tsunami of video game movies. And I'm sure 5-7 years from now, everyone's going to be really sick of them. Just like, everyone's kind of like collectively a little tired of comic books at this point. It always goes in these waves, and then I'm sure we'll go and do another reboot. And then at some point, we'll start making, I don't know, product. It'll be like Skittles, the movie or something. Like, I don't know what's next.
How much of the ability for these to hit, and this is something we talked about with Troy Baker, the voice actor behind Joel in the Last of Us games, and a guest star in the 8th episode of The Last of Us is James. He was on the show a few weeks ago, And we talked to him about like how technology has changed this a little bit. Jason Concepcion, the nerd culture critic, was also here like a couple of months ago talking about this. How much do you think, technology and the way that it's evolved has allowed for these adaptations to come to life in the way that they have more recently?
Yeah, I mean, well, it's funny because you could have technically made Mario 10, 15, 20 years ago if you really wanted to. Like, there's nothing in it that's like using AI or anything like that, right? Like, but I think the fact that it was made now is part of the reason it looks so incredible and it's such like an amazing spectacle to watch and look at and enjoy. So I'm glad we waited collectively to make it. I think for live action stuff like that, like the live action space has really benefited from a huge boost in technology. Things like The Last of Us, for example, Arcane as well. Like these are like technological advancements that would have been just so prohibitively expensive 10 years ago even. But the fact that now you can do a whole show that looks like Arcane and it's like producible and somehow like doesn't crater the entire studio, that's incredible because it's very hard to do. Last of Us, that's so many visual effects. It's like every single shot is a visual effect. But now
Yep.
you can do them lighter team, faster render times. It's been really exciting to watch. I think as a kid who grew up in the era when like I kind of like grew up with one foot in like practical effects and models and one foot in like CGI when it was starting to take off, and kind of like to watch that transition and just to see how much you could do with it. We went through some janky times. I mean, there was like Scorpion King and all these things, but
Oh my God.
once
Yeah.
we made the leap, no, it's really cool. It's an awesome time to consume stuff, right? Like it's a really exciting time to just to have entertainment around because it looks so good sometimes. Uh, and there's so many different things you're able to make these days too. Like Arcane's a pretty like wild thing as well. Like I don't think anyone would have made that 5 years before it was made.
Yeah. Yeah. We brought up both Doom and Scorpion King in the past like 5 minutes, and I think
Roasting
the
Rock.
yeah, I was about to say the Rock is the one that's maybe benefited the most from the fact that VFX and CGI has evolved. It's
We're
but
starting
it's
to
okay. He's the highest paid movie star in all of Hollywood, so sucks to be him, I guess.
yeah,
It's
it's a tough life.
yeah, in terms of something I was talking to somebody else about yesterday that also works in entertainment that I hadn't really thought about, just because I didn't think about it a lot, is like we've reached a generation in Hollywood now, people like yourself, people like myself, who now is like producing documentaries and some other things that I'm working on in the current pipe. We are gamers by trade, right? Like we grew up playing these things, we understand them. It's not like a Hollywood studio executive that is 50, 60 years old. It's like trying to tell us how to translate Mario and League and The Last of Us, etc. Sure, they have some impact, but I listened a lot to the Last of Us pod where Craig Mazin talked about the sort of process of getting Neil Druckmann in the room and like going through the pitch process of pitching the Last of Us, and how having someone like Neil, one of the co-creators of the game, in the room impacted the ability to bring it to life. There's like there's a respect of the resume and the expertise of people that played video games now in Hollywood that I think did not exist even a decade ago.
Oh,
Did you get the sense working with everybody on this film that like a lot of people had a very emotional connection to Mario, and that it was coloring the way that you all were working on the film?
oh, totally. Yeah, no, I think you could tell immediately. Like everyone is like a big fan of the property. Everyone like grew up loving Mario, and it's funny. There's something to be said for like growing up with something or like playing it for like a chunk of your life, because there's a feeling. I think like when I think of Mario, I don't actually like play a ton of video games. Mario was always the one I would play. Like that was like it's like Nintendo's like the core of my gaming being. But there's like just like a feeling of Mario that you can kind of like grow up with at some point. So when we were all making the movie, we all kind of like shared this feeling of like what this property is and what it means to all of us. So there's sort of like a collective understanding that just comes with time. And I think earlier days when video games were more of a niche or kind of like a weird thing to do, like back in the day, there was a ton of Hollywood executives and producers and stuff who just didn't understand it, didn't get why it connected to people and what the right way to treat it was. But now like you said, it's like we're kind of at this point where we've all just been playing games for so long. It's just sort of like part of the fabric of entertainment at this point. It's not a weird thing at all. So there's sort of like a collective like understanding now. I can sense in the industry. Everyone's like, all right, we know what these are. Like we don't have to like treat this like a weird outlier by any means anymore. There's not that many movies, there's not that many examples of how to do it right yet. But I think everyone has the right idea. So I'm excited, like you said, for it's kind of like the next 7 to 10 years of this. We're gonna get some incredibly cool projects, and we'll get a few stinkers as well. But
Yeah, I think we're gonna get a lot of stinkers. Unfortunately, not everything is gonna be meant to go to the big screen from video game world, and unfortunately, we've seen a lot. Like the Duke Nukem film is like, I was like, how the hell is that gonna like work? Even if it gets all the way far enough to do it, but it's been greenlit to do it. They've ordered it, so it's like, what is I'm excited for some of them though, like Fallout and others that I'm just like, all right, this is kind of cool. Like, some of the, a lot of people in the back of the Mario movie, we started talking about other Nintendo IPs too that might translate very well to the big screen, like Metroid as like almost like a horror film. Could be really fun. And so I want to ask you, if you had to take video games in your life that you enjoyed and you think could translate well, what are you creating if you had the power to just do it yourself and greenlight these things?
I'm making Pong the movie. I'm gonna do it. It'll be the first one. I want a Blockbuster
Pong tournament.
That's right.
Yeah.
The main character will be a cube versus another cube, and it'll be so easy to draw. It's a storyboard artist's dream.
Any others? There anything else in your mind?
No, you know what? I would love to do Alien Hominid. I don't know if you ever played that game. It's like started on Newgrounds like way back in the day. That's where I got my animation start. So I grew up with this goofy little game. I freaking love it. It's like aliens and violence and secret agents. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Newgrounds. The first guest on the show is Marcus Bromander, who is the co-creator of Among Us, and he is also a Newgrounds alum. He still makes Newgrounds stuff even now with all the success of Among Us and being completely independent of it. So yeah, I remember playing Newgrounds games myself too. It's been a long time.
It's got space in my heart.
So we are going to start taking some audience questions.
First of all, the Newgrounds mentioned, classic. Me and my friends used to make Flash animations where we were ninjas, so incredible. I have 2 questions, if that's okay. I'll try not to take up too much of your time. But Ed, what did you think of the original Mario movie? I watched that as a kid, and I loved it. I know it's way messed up, and it's super hacky, but I'm just curious.
Man, okay, so I actually had not seen it like the whole time I was making the Mario movie. I avoided it like the plague because I was like, I don't want to like infect my mind with whatever the hell this movie is. So I finally watched it near the end of production with some buddies of mine. It's the craziest goddamn thing I've ever seen. I cannot believe they made it. I'm not gonna lie, I had a great time. It was great.
Did you have any good takeaways from that one?
Don't do cocaine.
Oh my god, so true. Yeah, I don't want to expound too much on that one, but definitely, if you don't know what we're talking about, go see the original one from the 90s, I think?
2 or something like that? It was too early.
Yeah.
It was too soon.
Way too soon. My second question is, as a kid, I just kind of assumed that Bowser was trying to marry Peach. Like, he kidnapped her, so of course he was trying to marry her. And that was my premise for every evil villain that kidnapped a princess. And I think that's pretty common. I never remember it very explicitly being said. And I found it really charming that you guys kind of just kept it simple. I read a critic review that said they were furious about the fact that Peach and Mario just became friends, as if it needs more exposition, that a New York plumber going to a magical mushroom kingdom needed more. I personally don't think so, but was like, did you guys have like a keep it simple, stupid sort of like theme or anything like that? Because like I said, it was just so charming to like be like, yeah, of course he wants to marry her. Duh. Like, it was lovely.
Yeah, duh.
I'm glad I landed. No, that's great to hear. Thank you. I think it was funny to read those critic reviews because there's so many people like, oh, the story, it's paper thin, blah blah blah. Well, I think they completely forget that the movie's like War and Peace compared to like playing a Mario game. But yeah, no, I think that that's very part and parcel with kind of like how Illumination makes movies. It's sort of like how we wanted to get this story across. It's like it's very just kind of clear iconography that like everyone can understand. We want to make sure like kids through old people go into this and be like, oh yeah, he's the bad guy. He's gonna marry the princess. That's terrible. Go kick his butt. It was a very conscious decision to make it like not too tangled up in itself.
Yeah, I definitely love that you guys didn't make it pretentious at all. You knew exactly what you were making, and I really appreciated it, by the way. It made my day. It's been a rough couple years, and that was a joy to watch. So thank you so much. That's the end of my question.
Thanks so much. I'm glad it landed.
We have another question from Weird O.
Yes. Hi, Ed. First of all, I loved the movie. I thought it was great. It was exactly what it was exactly what I always thought a Mario movie could be, and a little bit more. I wanted to ask, how did you guys sort of like, because Mario's been around for like, man, about 30 to 40 years, and how did you guys pick, well, we want to do Mario Kart, and then we also want to do Donkey Kong, and then we also want to put Luma Lee in there, who steals the show.
Luma's great.
I loved Luma Lee. Every line from him made me laugh. But how did you guys like sort through, like, we want to incorporate every single era of Mario into this film and have it work cohesively, so it's all one big melting pot?
Yeah. No, it was a huge challenge. Some of those decisions I wasn't in the room for. Some of them I was. I think it helps that there has been Mario around for so long, so we kind of like know what like fans like the most, and kind of like what most people are attached to. Like obviously Mario Kart is such a huge like crowd pleaser, so we're like, duh, we gotta have Mario Karts in there. Like this would be a terrible Mario movie without karts, and Donkey Kong, and so there's a couple like staples and tentpoles that we knew we had to have. And then there's things like Luma Lee, which was just like we just thought it was funny. So there's a couple things that like helped organically with the story. A few things that like found its way in there to help solve story problems. So I don't know, it was a very organic process in some ways, and some of it was like very carefully architected and thought through in others. But yeah, we wanted to get more in there, but I think we filled it as densely as we possibly could.
As someone who plays a lot of Smash, that made me want to punch Luma more. Like, just but it was so funny, just the depressing, like, the comedic relief is great. Comedic relief is great.
4-year-old's daughter was the voice. I was like, you're making kids say this stuff, man?
Jesus. The next question is, were there any point in the movie or any points in the movie's development that people took aspects from Mario spinoffs like Paper Mario or Mario and Luigi, or were there any restrictions as to what design/characters you could use, for example, the Toad designs or Toadsworth?
Oh yeah. We took mostly just from the Mario main canon, the main storyline. I think we wanted to make sure it was like a Mario movie. So that's why I think the whole thing's like very much focused on just that main Mario storyline there. And in terms of the art, like Nintendo was super helpful in guiding kind of like how things looked and what stuff they wanted to put in the film as well. We would cook up a couple ideas, and they'd be like, oh, that's cool. What if we actually use this design, or what if we use this guy instead? So they actually helped us a lot in sort of like forming the movie to feel as like Nintendo and Mario as possible. So it was, I think I was really grateful to have their input on this stuff, because we obviously love the games, we've played them a ton, but I'm not like a PhD in Mario. So it was really helpful to have the Mario PhDs essentially come in and tell us like, all right, this is like what this actually looks like, and here's this other thing you can use instead of this. So it was really cool collaboration. They were really awesome to work with.
Yeah, I have a relationship and have interviewed a couple different times Ben Roseman, who is the like head of I don't know, like basically oversees Marvel Games, and that's kind of his role, is basically like to come in and be like, all right, Insomniac, like this is what you do, right? Like and sort of like lay out the groundwork basically from comic book to and everybody I talk to like that has ever met him, that has worked with him, is like, that guy's just an encyclopedia of like everything Marvel comics. Like he just knows the whole thing, right? And like and put his finger right on something. So it's really funny. I suspected that was the way that it worked with Nintendo though too. Like you guys are kind of leaning on them to like pull and draw, right? Because who knows it better. So
Pull, yeah.
we'll have this next question, which is from Focus Fire.
Hi, Ed. It's nice to speak with you. Love the movie, and yeah, just really loved it.
Thank you.
But you're welcome. I just want to know, like, how do you plan your storyboards? Because I noticed that like watching this movie like 3 times, this might be one of the best looking anime movies I've ever seen. And I was like, how did they do this? How did the entire story team do this? That's what I'm most curious about.
Oh, with great difficulty. No, we definitely took a lot of passes on things. It's a very iterative studio, so we'll do things like over and over and over again, which I think helps find kind of like the best version of it. Even though it's hard to do, it's hard to make it, but it does help to like get notes from all these different people and all these different points in the process. Illumination also on this movie, we have an amazing layout department, which for kind of like the layman outside the industry, the layout department is basically the first step between storyboards and animation. They kind of translate what we've done in the boards and they turn it into an actual 3D space with a digital camera. And that's sort of like, it's the set of what they're going to essentially use for the animation. So a lot of times they would like help problem solve with us. They would plus things up. They would do like alternate shots of stuff that they found that was really cool that we, maybe hadn't discovered. So it was a really cool collaboration between us and like all these other departments who would work together. We would plan our shots out as best we could and try to be as cinematic as possible. But I don't think the movie would be here without like the collaboration between us and like all the other departments who like plus it up along the way. Very lucky to work with all these freaking powerhouses.
That makes sense. And, yeah, honestly sounds like a lot of work and a lot of trial and error.
It was a fun one. We're lucky to have the team we did.
Is there advice you would give to other people in your position or looking to get into your position, Ed, as someone who's working on storyboards and trying to break into the animation industry?
Yeah, and I get that question a lot. There's a million ways to do it. I think the best thing you can do is 2 things. Thing one is talk to people. Just reach out, have a conversation, ask someone for coffee, and just kind of like plant some roots in the industry or adjacent to it best you can. So the animation's, it's a very small industry. It's a very collaborative industry. People end up working together for like decades and decades. Kind of finding your way into that community is a great way to just get some boots on the ground. And then the other thing you can do is just make stuff. I think it's a really awesome time, like you were talking about with like technology. There's so much technology available to people to just put something together, do it right, do it good, and share it with so many eyeballs. And I think the more you can just make stuff, practice your craft, get good at it, get eyeballs out there, that'll also spur more conversations. And that will eventually, sometimes it takes a while. It took a while for me too, but you will eventually find your way kind of like into it. So yeah, talk to people, make a lot of shit.
Well, thank you very much for this interview. We've really enjoyed having you. I love when we have people that are super, super passionate about their work. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Visionaries on YouTube. For more content, please subscribe to the Overcome channel.